my water just broke. I felt like things really intensified.
She was right there and she was coming.
It was an amazing feeling.
I'm gonna cry just thinking about it. I could feel her head.
We heard her cry. We were squeezing hands and she was screaming.
I'm Bryn Hunt Palmer, and you're listening to The Birth Hour. This podcast is designed as a safe place to come together and share childbirth stories. Stick around and join us to hear informative and empowering birth journeys from all over the world. If you're new to The Birth Hour, you may not know that we have an online childbirth course that is evidence-based. It includes 12 modules that take you from your final weeks of pregnancy through obviously preparing for birth, and then postpartum and feeding your baby as well. And with enrollment in that course, which is called Know Your Options, you'll get free access to our other course called Beyond the First Latch, where we talk all about pumping, feeding baby, storing milk, going back to paid work if that's part of your plan, all of those things as well. Okay, so if you go to thebirthhour.com/course, you can see everything laid out in the course, module by module, as well as an FAQ section, which will hopefully answer some of your questions if you have any, things like how to get it covered by an FSA account and things like that. It also talks about the bonuses that come with the course, including bi-monthly Zoom calls and access to our private Facebook group. So again, that's thebirthhour.com/course. And you can use the coupon code 100OFF for $100 off enrollment as a podcast listener. We would also love to welcome you into our listener supporter group via Patreon. That's at patreon.com/birthhour. And by becoming a Patreon supporter, you get access to all of our archived episodes. This podcast launched in 2015, so we have over 800 episodes in the archives that are not in the main podcast feed. So you can get your fill of birth stories. And you'll also get access to our private Facebook group for Patreon members, which is a great place to honestly just to search the past posts to get answers to questions, but then of course to ask new questions, find community. It's a really, really great supportive group of people. So I highly recommend joining that. We would love to have you there. We also do monthly Zoom calls with our Patreon supporters, and you get an opportunity to enter your birth story via a different submission form than everyone else uses, and we choose 2 Patreon members each month to share their birth stories. So that is again at patreon.com/birthhour. There's also the opportunity to give Patreon membership as a gift, and that's just patreon.com/birthhour/gift. And it's pretty cool. You can click on which level you want to join, and then you can click on how many months. So somebody can gift you a year, which gets you a pretty good discount, but also they could do 9 months as, for your whole pregnancy or something like that. So that's a fun option. And again, that's at patreon.com/birthhour/gift. Today's birth story guest is Nora, and she's going to talk about 2 birth stories. Her first was a difficult induction, and then she goes on to struggle with secondary infertility as well as having an ectopic pregnancy. She finishes by talking to us about an accidental unassisted home birth after a very quick labor. Today's episode is in partnership with Anido. Anido is the only at-home fertility monitor that tracks 4 key hormones, estrogen, LH, PDG, and FSH, on a single test strip and provides lab-grade insights in just 10 minutes. Unlike other ovulation kits that only give you 1 to 2 fertile days, Anido tracks your full 6-day fertile window and doesn't just predict ovulation, it confirms it, which is essential information when trying to conceive or understand your hormone health. Instead of piecing together fragments of information, it offers a full, clear picture of hormone health. With 97% accuracy, Anido offers the reliability of a blood test minus the inconvenience and the expense. I've had the chance to personally use Anido, and I was amazed at the user experience of their app. You enter your last period date, and from there the app guides you through exactly what to do and even sends you a notification when it's time to test. The kit comes with everything you need to collect a urine sample, and the Anido connects to your phone's camera to read the test. There's no squinting and guesswork. We've all been there. It's just easy to read results and clear directions when you're in that fertile window and when you ovulate. The Anido Starter Pack is available for just $89 with the code THEBIRTHHOUR at anido.com. That's INITO.com using code THEBIRTHHOUR. Y'all know I only recommend products that I really believe in, and I truly wish I had had this product when I was trying to conceive our third baby, and I know it's going to be a game changer for so many of you. So again, I hope you check it out at anido.com, coupon code THEBIRTHHOUR. All right, let's hear from Nora. Hi, Nora. Welcome to the Birth Hour. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, of course. We've got plenty to get to today, but before we do that, will you tell listeners a little bit about you and your family?
So I'm Nora. I'm from Seattle, Washington. My husband and I actually knew each other in high school and reconnected in our late 30s. We've been married 7 years next month, and we have a 5-year-old son and a 16-month-old daughter. I'm an accountant, and my husband owns his own business, and I'm a huge birth nerd. So coming on this podcast and sharing my stories has been a dream of mine for a while. So thank you so much for your podcast and the community you've created around it. I really love it.
Oh, thanks for saying that. And I'm excited to hear your stories. I'm just have a big smile on my face because the ages your kids are now, I just have the fondest memories of those ages. So,
oh yeah, they're really fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and start with wherever you want to start with with getting pregnant, finding out you're pregnant, anything like that.
Yeah, we got married in August 2018, and I didn't really know that much about the process of getting pregnant. I've always been really interested in birth. I was born at home with a midwife, and we always had books about birth and pregnancy around when I was a kid, maybe just so I would stop asking my mom so many questions. I don't know. So I have just always been interested in birth, but the whole process of getting pregnant, I didn't really know that much about it and didn't do anything special to try to get pregnant the first time. We were lucky that it just took maybe 3 months. And I knew that I'd always wanted to have an unmedicated birth, but I think I hadn't thought about the setting enough, about how the right provider and the right setting is so important to your birth plan. So I ended up finding a longtime OB who was recommended by the doctor that I had been seeing who was not delivering babies. And she said, this OB is wonderful. She really cares about her patients and spends a lot of time with them. And I did really find that to be true. I mean, the appointments were not rushed. She was wonderful and warm. She did talk a lot about my weight. It's every appointment, she's like, well, you've already gained a lot of weight and we really need to keep an eye on that, which is just, when you're pregnant, it's well, what am I going to do? Go on a diet? I mean, it was just, I felt like it wasn't really something I wanted to focus on.
Right.
And then the whole pregnancy, my blood pressure was a bit high. Even at the very first appointment at 6 weeks, it was a little higher than usual. So that kept being a concern. Other than that, it was a pretty unremarkable pregnancy. We had the unbelievable privilege to take a childbirth class from Penny Simpkin. She was 81 at the time, and she passed away last year, but she was just the most amazing woman. I always recommend her book, The Birth Partner, to anyone who's pregnant, not just for their partner that's supporting them, but for them. It's so great to have as a resource. Pages are color coded, so you can flip around to whatever section to get tips about coping with labor pains and all these different things. So by 32 weeks, the OB was really noting my high blood pressure. It would usually be high when I first got there, and they took it out in the hallway with the nurse, and then the doctor would take it a while later with the cuff, and it would be a little bit lower. But at the 38-week appointment, she did a cervical exam, and I was 1 centimeter dilated and 50% effaced. And then I knew something was up because she wanted to move my 39-week appointment to be a little bit earlier. So we showed up at 38 weeks and 5 days, and she said she had consulted with her colleagues, and with my high blood pressure, she thought that I should be induced. And we were like, okay, well, what do you recommend? And she's like, you should be induced tonight. And she did say we could refuse and we could do additional monitoring, probably NSTs and all that stuff. But we were just first-time parents, just wanted to do whatever the doctor said. And so we said, okay, we'll check into the hospital tonight. And I was with Kaiser at this time, and they used to have a labor and delivery ward. I actually used to live directly behind it. And so I'd be walking back to my apartment, and I'd see people kind of pacing around the after hours entrance about to give birth, which was always kind of fun. But they closed that down. And so here in Seattle, it seems like more and more labor and delivery units, NICUs, midwife practices are all closing down, and they just want to funnel everyone into the big hospital here where deliver? Almost every time I meet someone else, I ask, oh, where did you deliver? And they say this big hospital. So my doctor was at Kaiser, but I had to deliver at the big hospital. So I didn't meet other doctors in her practice, and I wouldn't have met the Kaiser hospitalist that was there anyway. So I didn't really like that aspect. I mean, almost everyone that I saw in that hospital I had never met before. But we checked in at 9 p.m. It was kind of nice to get everything ready, like get the bassinet set up, have one last dinner, get the house ready, and not have to drive to the hospital in labor. But we checked in at 9 p.m. and they started misoprostol and placed the Foley balloon. I could see when they hooked me up to the monitor that I was already having contractions. I wasn't feeling them. And I had like the last few days, I had this kind of it's like a strange pain in sort of like my bikini line. And I didn't know what that was. And looking back, I wonder if that was related. I don't know. I mean, I certainly couldn't feel anything that coincided with the contractions that I could see on the monitor. The Foley balloon was not painful having inserted. I hear, very mixed reviews of the Foley balloon, but it was totally fine. About 4 hours later, they came in to check it, and then the nurse just pulled on it a little bit and it just flew out. So it didn't take long to do what it was supposed to. And the monitor showed I was having contractions like every 2 to 5 minutes. And I was 3.5 centimeters dilated at that time. So they waited a little bit for the next round of misoprostol. And that next morning at 9:30, they started Pitocin. I still wasn't really feeling that much. And my mother-in-law arrived. She was sort of like a doula to us. She had 2 unmedicated births, and she's just such a calming presence. I really thought that she would be someone that I wanted there to support us in labor. And just nothing was really happening all day. We were just kind of hanging out, talking. At a certain point, my mother-in-law and my husband went on a walk, and the doctor came in. This was about 2 p.m. The doctor came in and suggested breaking my water. And I just thought, well, nothing's really been happening. Might as well get things going. And I didn't realize how quickly things would intensify after that. In hindsight, I wish I had waited at least until my husband and my mother-in-law were back in the room for that support. So they broke my water, and then just immediately the contractions were so much more intense. I felt like I wasn't getting a break in between them. It was like from 0 to 100, like right away. And I kept trying to do things to get more comfortable, like move around in bed or get up and go to the bathroom. But it's like, I've got all these monitors and IVs, and I couldn't get comfortable. I couldn't do anything to alleviate the pain or really cope with it in any way. It was like, I'd get up to go to the bathroom, and then, the fetal monitor would come off my stomach and they'd come in, and it was just really intense. So by the time my husband and my mother-in-law came back in, they could tell that the mood in the room had really shifted. And I decided to try a dose of fentanyl. It was about an hour and a half after they broke my water. And it did nothing. I mean, I just thought it was so crazy that it's like this very, very strong drug. It did nothing for the pain. And I think they said you could only get 2 or 3 doses of the fentanyl. So I just said, no, I'm not going to mess around with that. I want to get the epidural. It came really quickly. Anesthesiologist was great. So that was at about 3:40. And then I slept for a couple hours. I just rested and relaxed. And they came in and said I was fully dilated. So I think I had gone from like maybe a 6 when I got the epidural to fully dilated in about 2 hours.
Wow, so fast.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty fast. And, it's hard to say it, but part of me is always like, well, what if I hadn't gotten the epidural? But then part of me thinks I really needed to relax to be able to dilate the rest of that way. You never know.
Right.
And so they said, okay, let's get started pushing. And it was a pretty good epidural. I could still move around. I could support myself on my hands and knees, but I really did not feel any urge to push. They kind of kept moving me around because if I was on my back, my son's heart rate would drop, and I didn't feel like I was pushing effectively on all fours. So it was just really hard to tell what was going on. They put a scalp monitor on the baby, And I had like an oxygen mask. There's all these things that I really didn't remember at the time, but kind of came back to me later. It was so intense. I just felt like I couldn't tell what I was doing. They were worried about the baby, just always concerned about the heart rate. And I just didn't feel like I was doing it right. And I couldn't tell how to. And after about 2 hours of pushing, they recommended using the vacuum to get the baby out. And I was like, sure, whatever we need to do. I really want to hopefully avoid a C-section. Let's do the vacuum. And when they use the vacuum, my doctor was not the one that did it. There's another doctor that specializes in the vacuum. And then also an infant resuscitation team enters the room. And so the room was just filling up with people. I wasn't really aware of it because I was really in the zone, but my husband was really worried. He says he was worried about losing me. Not that like I was going to die, but that something would happen to the baby and that I would never be the same and that we would never be the same. And I think it's just what I've told him in retrospect is that if it was that much of an emergency, we would have just gone in for a C-section. It was surprising to me with the vacuum. I thought like you put the vacuum on, the baby just flies out, right? But no, you still have to push. And it was just really, really difficult and intense. And the vacuum can pop off. There's a certain number of times that it can pop off before they can't use it anymore. And I think that was why they said, okay, we can only use this one more time. So one more push, that's it. And then basically we're going in for a C-section. And they let me do about 3 more pushes after that. And his head came out. The cord was up by his head. So I think it was getting compressed a little bit as he was coming down. And maybe that's why his heart rate was dropping. And once I could see that his head was starting to come out, I just pushed as hard as I could. And then at 8:33, he came out. I was so surprised by how small he was because I thought, it's so hard to push him out. He must be huge. But he was 6 pounds, 7 ounces, and they put him right on my chest. So he was born at 8:33. So it was almost exactly 24 hours. I didn't really notice the placenta being delivered or being stitched up. I think I was just in shock and then just taking in having this new baby on my chest. And it's so hard I don't know what I thought he would look like. You carry a baby and you connect with them, but I feel like they always look differently than you thought, yet at the same time, you've known them your whole life. It's really hard to explain, but he didn't look like I thought he would, but I just immediately felt connected to him. He latched right away. We had this wonderful golden hour where the cafeteria had closed at 8, so my husband had to go get me food. I was starving by this point, and my husband went to go get me a burger, and I was just nursing my baby. There was a nurse in the room, and she was charting, and I think just sort of had to be there just to make sure that I was okay, but she was like completely silent and respectful of this moment that I was having with my baby. We got transported to postpartum. After a couple hours, the postpartum hospital stay was really unpleasant. It was so cold in the room, and I felt like we didn't know what we were doing. And it's like the baby's crying and the nurse comes in and you're like, please help. Like, I don't know what to do. And then they just like show you how to swaddle them with that blanket again, which like you're never going to do after the hospital. I just didn't feel like they were actually helpful. So I was super happy to go home, but our son was jaundiced. So we had to have him on a light bed at home. It was really nice that they came to our house to do that. There would be a nurse that visited every day to check his vitals, do like a heel prick to check his jaundice levels. And all those nurses were also lactation consultants. So it was really nice to just have any breastfeeding questions answered. We were triple feeding at that time, which was really tough. But once he just had like a massive poop, his jaundice levels went down, and he got off the light bed. It was only, I think, 2 nights that he was on there. And then he really started gaining weight really quickly. He was a great nurser. We didn't have to triple feed anymore after a couple weeks. The postpartum experience at home was very difficult. I think just the adjustment to having a baby and processing having a birth that was so much not what I wanted. I did meet with Penny Simpkin in her home to talk about my birth and process it. Yeah, it was, she just made me feel so good about it. And one thing that she always stressed is the difference between pain and suffering. And she said it sounded like you were suffering, and just wanted to, really make it clear to me that I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't cause this experience.
Yeah.
She was just, I feel so blessed to have that experience.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. And, breastfeeding was great. Sleep was tough. I think the hardest part for postpartum for me was now I know how amazing it is to be a parent and all the fun stages that your kids go through. But at that time I was like, I just see this needy little potato that can't smile at me. And, I couldn't envision the good that was to come. So I think that made it really hard for me. But once my son started being able to sit up, crawl, he seemed to get a lot happier and things just got much better from there.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that initial home care sounds amazing. I haven't heard that before.
Yeah, I feel like that was so nice. Jaundice is so common. It's 1 in 3 babies.
Yeah.
I wish I had learned more about it in any sort of education I'd had before giving birth. Mm-hmm. But most of our friends that had babies with jaundice had to take them back to the hospital. And it's just, It's terrible. So it's so nice.
Or they send the thing home, but there's not someone coming to check on you and do the heel pricks at home and stuff.
Yeah, that was really nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for sharing that story. And then I know you have kind of a longer journey to getting pregnant with your next. So let's start wherever you're comfortable there.
Yeah. When our son was a little over a year old, we decided to start trying for another child. But I knew so much more about pregnancy and birth at this time. So I immediately started tracking, doing the ovulation tests, tracking my basal body temperature. And I just expected it to be fast the way it was with our son. So after 6 months, I was starting to get a little bit nervous, and I had planned to make an appointment with a new doctor. The OB that delivered my son had retired, but then I ended up getting pregnant that next month. So at 9 weeks, I had a first appointment with a new OB. She had delivered my son's best friend. So she came highly recommended. She did an ultrasound, and I could tell immediately that it was not a viable pregnancy. And I don't know why she would not admit it. She just said, "Oh, there's something there, but maybe your dates are off. It looks small. I don't know. We should just wait." And I was like, no, I know when I ovulated, I know the dates. If there is no heartbeat at 9 weeks, this is not a viable pregnancy. And my husband had no idea what was going on because this doctor just wouldn't be honest. This was my first experience really having to advocate for myself and say, I need to know more. So they ordered blood tests. The first one, my HCG was really high, but the second one, it had dropped. And I then again had to advocate saying, can I get an actual ultrasound with radiology? So the next week I went in for that. And the ultrasound tech she was so kind. She was the first person to use the word miscarriage, which I already knew that it was. And I don't think, they're not supposed to say that kind of stuff. They're not really supposed to make a diagnosis, but I really appreciated her honesty. Mm-hmm. And we were given the options to wait or to try the medication, which they didn't really recommend because at that point I was 10 weeks and my body hadn't really shown any sign that it was going to release this non-viable pregnancy. So I opted for the D&C, which was really tough. I was not put under for it. So I was awake. I would just tell anyone who goes through the same experience to find something to distract yourself, listen to music on headphones or something like that. Just the noise that the machine makes was horrible. But the doctor, it was not my doctor that did the D&C. It was a different doctor who specialized in it. And she was very kind. She actually offered to show us the products of conception, which I said no, just because it's not like there was an actual baby. It was a blighted ovum, so a baby had never developed. The hardest part about the miscarriage, other than just how awful it is to experience a miscarriage at all, is that it took 3 months for my body to go back to normal and start ovulating again. And I was just so desperate to get pregnant again. And it was just this like agonizing being in limbo, waiting. I was also grieving this, this ideal age gap. My kids would have been 2.5 years apart, which I just thought, oh, that's perfect. That's exactly what I want. And then it was about 7 or 8 more months, I got pregnant again and had a chemical pregnancy. And this was around the time that we got established with a fertility clinic, and they started to do some initial testing. Everything looked normal except for they did a hysteroscopy where they, basically look in your uterus with a camera, and they did see some scar tissue, which they said was probably from the most recent loss. And they kind of just inserting the camera in there kind of breaks up the scar tissue. So they did a follow-up and everything looked good. So basically we were diagnosed with unexplained infertility. They didn't see any sort of issue. They said maybe since we just wanted one more kid to try IUIs. So we tried 2 IUIs. They didn't work. I said, a lot of people do try 3 for whatever reason before they move on to IVF, but I just knew it wouldn't work. So we decided to move on to IVF. That was in December 2022. So I had an egg retrieval a few days after my birthday in January 2023. I will say, I hear a lot of negative stories women have about IVF. I did not find it particularly difficult or painful. The side effects just weren't that bad. And maybe that's just because, I didn't have a huge number of eggs. They ended up retrieving 8. But from that 8, we got 3 genetically normal embryos, which is really great for my age. I was 38 at the time. And that's also 3 is kind of the number they tell you to shoot for one child because, it's not 100% success rate. So they did the first embryo transfer a couple months later. And I was pregnant, but the beta HCG numbers were low at first. Then they rose quickly. I really felt that something was wrong. But at the same time, I just kept telling myself, all your body needs is the right embryo. We just need a genetically normal embryo. The other stuff, it's just the embryo. That's the issue. At 7 weeks, we had the first ultrasound and we saw that it was an ectopic pregnancy. So there was a baby with a heartbeat in my right fallopian tube. I had to go straight from the fertility clinic to the emergency room, and they did some more ultrasounds. The doctor there, it was a doctor that worked with my reproductive endocrinologist in these type of situations, and she was wonderful. And people just kept asking me, "Are you in pain? Are you in pain?" And I wasn't, but they saw when they got in, I had to have a laparoscopic surgery to have my right fallopian tube and the pregnancy removed. My fallopian tube had just started to rupture and I was bleeding internally. So probably a couple hours a day later, I would have been in immense pain. I think we caught it at just the right time, but just the trauma of seeing a baby with a heartbeat, that could have been a child just like my son or my daughter. I kind of always wonder about that because that's a matter of centimeters difference between this baby living and not. And then my whole life would have been so different. I mean, we decided not to find out the sex of the embryos. I didn't want to make a decision or say they tell you, oh, they're all male. Well, then you know what your next kid is going to be, or they're all female. Yeah. I just didn't, I wanted to leave something up to chance. So I said, just put in, the best embryo. So the first embryo was gone. The second embryo transfer was a couple months later. I was quick to get back to normal after that ectopic pregnancy in terms of physically. I mean, emotionally, of course, it was tough, but I had a really good therapist. I think if you're dealing with pregnancy loss and infertility, you got to have a good therapist. We had a second embryo transfer in May, and that one just didn't work at all. So I decided, okay, we got to do something different. These 2 embryo transfers were both natural transfers, so they work with your cycle. I thought maybe we need to do something totally different, do the fully medicated protocol. I also scheduled a hysteroscopy again because some clinics, that's just standard. If you have a failed cycle, they want to just check and make sure everything looks good in your uterus. So I scheduled that. I ordered all the medications. So we were planning for third and final embryo tray. I mean, it was the only embryo we had left. And we had said, okay, we'll do this one round of IVF and then that's it. So this was kind of like, well, this is our last chance, right? This is our last hope. I don't know. Thinking back now, I think we probably would have done whatever it took to have another kid. But this was just sort of like, this is it. Literally put all of my eggs in one basket and just do this. So we're getting ready for the transfer. And then, you have to let the clinic know when you get your next period. I didn't get my next period because I got pregnant. We conceived unassisted after all that. Being 38, the 3 prior losses, 1 fallopian tube. And I just felt immediately, of course, with everything that we had been through, I was nervous and anxious, but I just felt that this was right from the beginning. I really felt like I could feel my daughter's spirit and that everything was going to be okay.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. They had to turn that hysteroscopy appointment into an early ultrasound. So it was like just a little bit after 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And the doctor was like, okay, this is really early. We might not see anything. Like, don't panic. And then as soon as we started the ultrasound, I gasped because I saw that it was exactly how it was supposed to look. I saw the heartbeat. I just couldn't. I could believe it, but also I couldn't. And so it's really nice when you're with a fertility clinic. I had 2 early ultrasounds. I also had one at 8 weeks. Everything looked good. And I moved on I had found a midwife practice at a different hospital from where I delivered my son. I really did not want to go back to that hospital after my experience there. And I also had found this midwife who was just amazing. And she actually specializes in pregnancy after loss. She was just unbelievable. I loved working with her. I also met, there's, I think, 5 midwives in the practice, and they want you to meet all of them. So I think I met like 4 of them, and they were all just lovely. After that, it was actually an easier pregnancy than with my son. We found out, we did the NIPT and found out it was a girl, which I had just always wanted a daughter. No offense to my son, love him to death, but like I had just always dreamed of having a daughter. And then, once you have one, you're like, well, maybe I won't have a daughter. Maybe I'll just have another boy. Of course, that would have been wonderful, but it just felt like such a gift to find out that we were having a girl. And I hired doulas this time. I found a doula team where there's 3 doulas and they kind of have different specialties. So one does placenta encapsulation, one is a lactation consultant. So you meet with her before, and it was cool to have a team. But I kind of had one that I really wanted to be there for my birth. And it's just whoever you get, when you call them, when you're in labor, that's the one you get. I read this book, Mindful Birthing. So I started doing some like mindfulness and meditation, and I did visualizations of how I wanted the birth to go. And whenever I would do these visualizations, I would imagine this particular doula coming. And what's interesting is I always had it like my labor starting in the morning, like after a good night's sleep. And then I would do these visualizations as I was falling asleep at night. And then I always fell asleep before the part where I got to the hospital, which is interesting. Another thing that happened when I was pregnant was around 30 weeks, I actually found the notes from my birth. So, I was born in 1985, like I said, with midwives at home, and they didn't have contraction timers back then. So I had like the notes of my dad, like writing down the times of all my mom's contractions, and the notes from the midwives saying, when everything happened, when they got to my parents' house, when they broke her water. It was really cool to find these. And I decided to interview, it's not the same midwife, but the midwife that had taken over the practice from those midwives. And I really liked the midwife. I had thought maybe I'll deliver in the birth center there, which is really just like a house in my neighborhood. It's like a 5-minute drive away from me. But I ultimately decided not to switch. I just really loved the midwife that I was seeing at the other hospital. And I just felt like, I'm not sure if I want to deliver at the birth center or at home. We had a really small house. I couldn't really picture myself delivering there. The only other thing that happened was at 37 weeks, I went in and my fundal height hadn't changed. So it was a different midwife from the one I usually saw. She wanted us to have an ultrasound. I think she was concerned about the fluid levels. So we went in and I was just like, oh God, they're going to have to like send me to the hospital to get induced right now. I was so worried about getting induced again because I just really didn't want that to happen. And the fluid levels were fine. It was funny because we had never seen like such a late ultrasound and my daughter was all smushed in there. And my husband was like, oh my God, like, is that what her face is going to look like? Because like her nose was all like squished up against the side of my uterus. And I was like, no, I think she's just like out of room. I don't think that's what she looks like. And I asked my midwife at the next appointment, what do you think about this ultrasound? She's like, it's fine. Like that midwife is just a little more old school and she wants to like make sure that the doctors that we work with aren't going to get mad at her. And I do think at a certain point you kind of stop. And this was the same thing with my son. I kind of stopped gaining weight at the end. I stopped getting bigger. I think it was just like, it was about as big as I was going to get. And, with my son, I had hoped to have like a week where I was done with work and could relax and do all of these things to get ready for the birth. And ultimately that didn't end up happening because I went straight in to get induced from working that day. So with my daughter, the same thing. I had planned to be done with work at 39 weeks and then maybe just have some time off, just relax. And on my last day of work at 9 p.m. that night, I started to kind of leak. I don't know if I had like a slow leak, but it was like a pink tinged liquid. And I hadn't had any signs of labor before. I was like 39 weeks and 2 days or something like that at this point. I had lost part of my mucus plug about a week before, but other than that, nothing had happened. And I started to leak a little bit. And then we were like, okay, it's 9 p.m. I remember reading in one of Ina May's books, if you go into labor at night, like have a glass of wine and take a bath and go to sleep. So I just thought, we're in for it. We should try to rest. And I had a contraction. And it's so funny because like even now, I can't remember what contractions feel like. But I knew right away. It's like, what it is. And you're like, oh yeah, that's what that is. But we just decided, let's go to bed. And I think I did probably sleep, at least on and off until about 11:45. And then I was like, no, I got to get up. I was definitely having contractions that whole time, not super painful, but I could notice them. So I decided to get up then and start timing the contractions. And I did see that they were immediately like 2 to 3 minutes apart, lasting about a minute. So I just started bouncing on the ball. I had a labor comb that my mom had given me, and I really liked that tool. I took a bath, and my husband said he was, kind of sleeping on and off. I didn't want to wake him up. I wanted him to get some rest, but he said he heard the bath start. He was like, oh, uh-oh. So I took a bath, and my son's favorite part of this story is that I ate some ice cream in the bath because I thought it sounded good, and I didn't know like when I would want to eat again or be able to eat again. I also spent a lot of time laboring on the toilet. That felt really good. It just felt so nice to be able to move around my own space. Obviously, really small house. My son's asleep, so it's not like I had the whole run of the place, running around screaming or anything. But it was just nice to be in my own space and honestly, just to kind of spend that time just laboring by myself. But around 1, I woke my husband up because I needed some help. And I also wanted to be able to like get in and out of bed. And so he helped me out by rubbing my back when I was on all fours. And then we just kind of started to try to figure out, okay, when are we going to leave for the hospital? We had to call my in-laws to come watch my son. And luckily they live really close. So I had a moment where I realized that I was tensing up and I was like, you know what? You just need to relax. Don't fight this. Just let it happen. And then at 1:30, I called the doula, and it was the one that I had hoped to get when I was in labor. So I was really excited about that. And she listened to me have some contractions and reminded me that I had a TENS machine that they had loaned me. And she said, you probably have a while to go. Let's check back in an hour and then maybe leave for the hospital then or just see what's going on. But yeah, try the TENS machine. And so we got the TENS machine set up, but I think at this point it was just too late. I couldn't really tell if I had it set up right, what was going on. And so at 1:45, like 15 minutes later, I kind of started to panic a little bit because I just didn't know how we were going to get to the hospital. And I also got it in my head to try to check my cervix. And for some reason, I checked myself and I was like, oh, I'm only 4 centimeters dilated. Like, I got to get to the hospital and get the epidural because I'm going to be in labor for so long. And I don't know. I honestly don't think I was feeling any cervix at all. I think it was just the baby's head, because at this point, I'm pretty sure I was in transition. We called my in-laws to come watch our son. And then at 1:53, we called the doula and said, okay, no, we need to go to the hospital now. We can't wait another, 40 minutes. Just meet us at the hospital. So I tried for a minute to like sit down on the yoga ball as my husband was like frantically getting our stuff together. And I was like, oh no, I can't sit down. Like, I don't know how I'm going to get in the car. I can't sit down. And I sat on the toilet and I heard somebody grunting. And then I realized that it was me. And my midwife had told me this story about, I think it was like another midwife that she worked with had been like in the shower in labor and been like, someone's pushing in here. And then she realized that it was her. And I had the same, like, it was just the fetal ejection reflex. I was pushing and I couldn't control it. So I jumped up on the bed and told my husband, she's coming right now. And I pushed once and her head came out and her hand was up by her head, like reaching out at me. And he called the doula back at 1:57 and said, the head is out. What do I do? And she was like, call 911. But I told him, the next push, the rest of the body is going to come out. So get ready. And he just kind of put his arms out and I pushed again and she just literally flew out and he caught her.
Oh my God.
And I could tell right away she was fine. She was big. She was healthy. And we were just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Can't believe this. And he did call 911 and my father-in-law showed up before the EMTs and firefighters came. And my husband was like, okay, well, the baby's here. And he's like, what? Like, he just couldn't believe it. So he came in, then the firefighters got there and, we had this tiny little house and there's all of these firefighters and EMTs and they're like stomping around. And my husband really didn't want to go to the hospital, but they were like, yeah, you should go get checked out. The firefighters were like, they were concerned about the placenta, but in a way of kind of like, oh, so are you going to like deliver the placenta now? Like they didn't, like I could tell they didn't really like, it's not like they knew what they were doing. I mean, they cut the cord and they left like 3 inches of umbilical cord. Like they were doing their best and they were great, very helpful, but they didn't know what they were doing in terms of like helping the placenta come out or properly cutting the cord. My son just slept through this whole thing. He slept through the EMTs, firefighters, everyone stomping around, us leaving the house. I'm so glad he's such a good sleeper.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
So they took us to the hospital. And unfortunately, they did have to take us to the big hospital where my son was born because the smaller hospital where we had planned to deliver, it's technically in Renton, so it's not in their jurisdiction. But, we actually ended up having a great experience at the big hospital. I mean, it was just so different. It had been over 4 years. Things changed during that time. Oh, another funny thing about the EMTs is they gave my daughter an APGAR score of 10, which is like, I've never heard of a baby getting that. I don't think that's really like, I've never heard higher than a 9. I mean, also she'd been born for like 15 minutes. So
they were like 10 out of 10 on this.
Yeah. They're like, she's great.
Love it.
It was cute because they, that was like relayed to the nurses at the hospital and they were like, okay, yeah, a 10. Like they just kind of laughed because they're like, that's not really a score that we give. But in the ambulance, I was really in a lot of pain. And I think it was just that I really needed to deliver the placenta. And there was a firefighter whose job was just to hold my daughter in the ambulance, which was very sweet. And I'm glad because as much as, I didn't want to be away from her, I was really in a lot of pain and I didn't feel like I could just like have her on my chest in the ambulance. I'm not sure that would have been the best idea. But at the hospital, the doctor went in to help me deliver the placenta. And I looked back at my notes for this part because I didn't remember this, but it was actually like already in my vagina. And so she just kind of pulled a little bit and it came out. So it was no problem getting it out. And then it was just an immediate relief. I was not in pain anymore. I actually felt amazing. In fact, so amazing that when they, ask you to get up and go to the bathroom, I was like, yeah, I feel great. And I like basically hopped out of bed. And then in the bathroom, I kind of started to lose consciousness a little bit because I had lost so much blood and they had to like sit me down our doula had come and met us at the hospital. So she was like rubbing my face with a wet washcloth, and they had to help me back to the bed. I think they gave me a couple bags of fluids. They said that I lost more blood than they wanted me to. And that was just at the hospital. So that doesn't take into account what happened at home, which there was a lot of blood that when we were in the hospital, my in-laws were at our house cleaning everything up, which is just so kind of them. The thing about having a planned home birth is you've got a tub, you've got like tarps, you have all of these preparations that we did not have. We had to get a new mattress. And another funny thing about when we were able to leave the hospital is that I didn't have shoes because when you get in the ambulance, I was like hauled out of there on a stretcher. I didn't have shoes on. But we didn't have to stay too long. They had wanted me to get an iron infusion because I had lost so much blood, but I said no. I was just really like desperate to get out of there. And I just took some iron supplements for a while, which was totally fine. And I know there's the evidence on it is mixed, but I did have my placenta encapsulated, and I do feel like that helped with the recovery a lot. Oh, another thing is the placenta was huge. It was like twice the size that it was with my son. It was just like so big and beautiful. And I noticed on like the notes when they encapsulated it, it said usually a placenta will make between like 80 and 160 pills. And I had like 170 or something. Like it was really big placenta. And that recovery was much easier. I think just, knowing what to expect. I had a first degree tear, but it was actually pretty difficult to heal because I had a paraurethral tear. And I find it interesting that they call it that, but basically like I tore through my inner labia to the side. And that's just a really uncomfortable place to heal. So like a month after, I went back to the midwife early and said, is this not healing right? And she's like, no, it's healing great. So like, that's good news and bad news. Cause like it's healing great, but also like, yeah, this is normal. It's just, there's a lot of nerve endings there and it's not a fun place to tear. But other than that, it was smooth sailing. She nursed well. She gained weight, no jaundice. It was just so beautiful. Also seeing my son with his little sister, he's just been always so sweet with her. And we didn't envision this. They ended up having a 4-month age gap. And that's not what we had pictured or planned, but it just worked out great. I mean, I know I would never say to somebody else who's experienced loss that everything happens for a reason, but I really think that for us, any other kid that we would have had wouldn't have been my daughter. So there was a reason that it happened that way.
Yeah.
So from my very first contraction to her being born was just under 5 hours.
Wild.
And I just don't know when we would have left for the hospital.
Right.
If we had, or even if we had like tried to go to the birth center, or if we had had a midwife coming to our house, I'm just not sure that anyone would have made it in time or that we would have made it there. I mean, it was really only the last half hour that felt particularly intense to me.
Right. Yeah. Second babies.
Yeah. That's what I tell all my friends,
Yeah.
And just learning about birth, regardless of what kind of birth you think that you're going to have, is so valuable because I have friends who they just say, no, I really just want to show up to the hospital and get an epidural. And I have friends who have shown up to the hospital and been too far along to get the epidural. And then they're like, oh no, I don't have any coping mechanisms. I don't know what to do. People are so confident, oh, I'm not going to have a C-section. I want this or that. And then they end up having a C-section. I mean, that's why I think it's so important to learn about all the different ways that things could go down.
Right. Yeah, I learned that very quickly from this podcast. And that's kind of how we built the childbirth course around that idea because, you want to be prepared for everything because it's so unpredictable.
Yeah, you just never know.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing those stories. I know you have a good list of resources. So are there some you want to share here?
Yeah, I mentioned The Birth Partner by Penny Simpkin, Mindful Birthing. I think it's Nancy Bardacki. That book was wonderful. I'm in the middle of reading I Had a Miscarriage by Jessica Zucker, and I'm really loving that book so far. It's just very brutal and honest. And I've also really enjoyed reading Babies Are Not Pizzas by Rebecca Decker, who does evidence-based birth.
Yes.
That was a wonderful book. Childbirth as a Rite of Passage by Rachel Reed, I really loved. And your podcast, of course. I also really love the Healing Birth podcast. I just love like birth stories of all kinds are just, feel like I'll never tire of listening to birth stories or talking to people about their birth stories. I love all of it.
Yeah. Well, I love them too, clearly.
Yes.
I've been doing it for quite a while. But those are great. We'll put those on the show notes. And then where can people reach out to connect with you?
Best way would be Instagram. And my Instagram handle is the Nora. So it's TheNorah. I love connecting with people about fertility, IVF, birth, anything like that. So feel free to reach out to me that way.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Nora.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much to Nora for sharing her birth stories with us and to Anito for sponsoring this episode. You can check out their fertility tracker at anito.com. That's INITO.com using the coupon code THEBIRTHHOUR to get the device for just $89. If you want more information from today's episode, including links to everything that Nora mentioned, as well as the Anito coupon code and everything, just head over to thebirthhour.com and search for Nora's name in the search bar to find her show notes page.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, head to thebirthhour.com and click Become a Member to pledge your support. And as a thank you, you'll get an invitation to join our private Facebook group and access to exclusive episodes. Your vote of confidence and support means the world to me.